In writing, there are generally three types of conflict that stories boil down to. You have man versus nature, man versus self, and man versus man. Man versus nature is the continuous fight against a primal force that existed long before and will continue to exist long after the blip on the radar that is humanity. These stories focus on the blistering cold, the scorching deserts, the untamed wild, and the fight to stay alive in these conditions. The natural elements in which any of these exist can be more dangerous than any man, animal, or artillery. Weather and environments have won battles, ended empires, and now it's your worst enemy. Man versus self comes from the conflict of self-actualization. When we no longer have to worry about the unforgiving whims of nature, we look inside ourselves and ask certain questions. Who are we? And what do we want to be? What internal decisions do we struggle with? What flaws in ourselves do we need to overcome? And who do we need to hurt before we take an honest look in the mirror at who we are? Man versus man is the conflict that arrives when two or more people have conflicting values. The intensity of this conflict depends on the combination of how fundamental they are to somebody's identity and how irreconcilable they are against somebody else's values. The more fundamental and irreconcilable the values, the more intense the conflict. Now, while there are still extensions of these, such as man versus man branching off into man versus society, and man versus nature branching off into man versus a supernatural or unknown, or the two even combining into man versus technology, these are the three most simplistic groupings of conflict in narratives. Many types of conflict can be present in a story, but usually, one takes center stage and dominates the narrative. After the release of the original Borderlands, the concept of RPG elements combined with shooter gameplay was now a proven formula that worked in the market for video games. Now that Gearbox knew about its success, it was time to capitalize on it and go bigger and better. A bigger budget for the game, a bigger world to explore, better customization options, better gameplay, and bigger war crimes that they commit alongside, such as Duke Nukem Forever and Aliens Colonial Marines. Now, to circle back to the concept of conflict, the first Borderlands was mostly a man versus nature type of conflict in the narrative. Yes, you fought the Atlas Corporation and bandits during the game, and people were mostly the main catalyst responsible for the story, but taking center stage was always the plan of Pandora. The danger of the wildlife, the untamed deserts, the lawlessness of the land, and the power of the vaults were always the main focus of the story. The bandits, the corporations, and even the vault hunters were always reacting to the mysterious and unknown forces of the planet. Nature was what held the power in this story, not any one actor. Pandora attracted the greed of Atlas, Pandora created the lawless towns and bandit camps, and Pandora drew in the vault hunters looking for riches. However, now, the balance has shifted. New actors have come into play. They recognize the danger. They recognize the power there for the taking, and they recognize how to bend it to their will. Now the Hyperion Corporation, led by Handsome Jack, has come to conquer nature and rule it. Not only has the scale of the gameplay become larger, but so has the conflict in the story. This has fundamentally moved from a man versus nature conflict to a man versus man conflict. What happens when one man's desire for unrestricted and absolute power clashes with those who refuse to live under it? That is Borderlands 2. With a new game comes new improvements. The movement is more responsive, the graphics and models are dripped out, and the environments in the world are much more expansive than in the first game. But it doesn't end there. Small improvements have been made to blend the story into the gameplay in a cleaner manner than its predecessor. Now, instead of reading through quests given to you by NPCs and having fewer voice lines, the entire game is voice acted. As you move away from people when they talk to you, they'll then communicate with you through the ecosystem, letting you play the game as you consume the story. Now, while we can make arguments about whether or not this is TikTok brain rot game design and advocate for the value of reading in-game lore to get you immersed in the universe, it's undeniable that this type of mechanic reduces the barrier between engaging with the story and playing the video game. Fundamentally, the goal of this type of game is to appeal to the widest variety of people it can. And when you do that, you have to make sure that no one element of the game takes away from another. That means that the story shouldn't take away from the gameplay and vice versa. The more people you make your game accessible to, the more money it can print. And fundamentally, whether you like it or not, that's AAA game design, and it makes way too much money to go anywhere. This type of design allows more players to interact with the world, get to know side characters, and be more emotionally invested in what's going on around them, while still getting the gameplay experience that they came to the game for. The fewer barriers that exist between different elements of the game, the more consistent and holistic of an experience that can exist among millions of players. The game features 4 main Vault Hunters and 2 DLC Vault Hunters. First up is Axton, who is your soldier character. Maya is the Siren. Zero plays like a ninja. Salvador is your dual-wielding bruiser. Gage is an engineer of a deadly robot, and Krieg is a playable psycho. What's most apparent about the Vault Hunters this time around is the lessons that were taken from the flaws of the previous characters. The abilities you work with feel much more interactive with the game and its world, and are built to mesh with the player's playstyle more efficiently. For example, in the first game, Roland's Scorpio turret only shot what was right in front of it, and the cover just really didn't work. The ability just felt a bit awkward and clunky to use, and worked against the whole efficient Atlas soldier thing. With a lot of the abilities of the turret being activated within a certain radius of it, it felt more like you had to play around it rather than existing as a tool to supplement your playstyle. In Borderlands 2, Axton's turret will shoot in a 360-degree area and has way more scenarios that can be deployed and taken advantage of in. The only ability that the turret has that's based around proximity to the player is picking it up to refund some of its cooldown when it's no longer needed in a certain position. Same with Lilith's phase walk ability being copy-pasted to Zero, but being more of a reposition with a focus on the melee attack at the end, rather than just being a get-out-of-jail-free card where you can restore your resources and then come back right to the fight. However, even though there are technically more restrictions here, you can either build towards the melee attack at the end, the reposition to get in sniper range, or somewhere in between. In the case of Axton, restrictions were removed. In the case of Zero, restrictions were put in place, but both were to enhance the gameplay. Brick's fists were replaced with Salvador's dual wielding, taking advantage of the guns you looted and adding some decisions to be made with the 2 you decide to fight with. Maya's phase lock isn't really similar to anything in the first game, you just lock an enemy in place. But later skill tree upgrades allow you to augment your phase lock to focus on crowd control, healing allies and tanking, or dishing out tons of elemental damage. The way you deploy your abilities and the situations you put yourself in to take advantage of them added some much needed skill expression that was lacking in the first game. The weapon manufacturers have been given much needed reworks to be more distinct from one another as well. Bandit weapons look like they were jerry-rigged together and have large magazines with not much other redeeming value. Daw weapons have a military look to them, low recoil, burst fire when zoomed, and are still boring.
Okay, I got my B-roll. Time to use actual fun guns.
Hyperion weapons have a polygonal and robotic construction and have more accuracy and less recoil as you continue to fire them.
Oh. Daddy, chill.
Jacob's weapons have an old-timey look and deal tons of damage with bonuses to critical hits and are pretty much unchanged from the first game. Malawan weapons are also pretty similar to the first game and are always elemental with a high effect chance. They also have a sleeker look to them. TDR weapons have a boxy bullpup design with poor stats and a low price, but they can be thrown as explosives when you reload, making them super useful when you go down and need some quick damage. Torg weapons are always explosive and have a bombastic hot rod-like design. Finally, Vladoff weapons boast high fire rates that increase as you hold down the trigger, low recoil, and a Russian-inspired design. All the weapons have unique naming styles, with bandit guns being misspelled, Torg weapons being innuendos, and Vladoff guns using Soviet revolutionary terminology. You can tell there was a why not kind of mentality when designing not only the weapons, but pretty much everything about the game. Want a gun that's thrown as an explosive when you reload? Why not? Want a character that only speaks in haiku? Why not? Want a side quest where you meet a guy named Face McShooty who exists solely for you to shoot him in the face? Why the fuck not? Does this game take itself a lot less seriously than the first game and lose some of the dark charm that added to the first game's intrigue? Yes. Do I prefer the first game's tone of storytelling? Also yes. But if that change allows developers the freedom to have fun with the design and put their maximum passion into the project, who am I to say that they're wrong to do it? Also, expecting all art to appeal to your specific preferences is ridiculous, because that would kind of ruin the point of it all, no? It wouldn't really be art if you never had your horizons expanded and your assumptions challenged. The only design decision I'm a bit torn on is the introduction of badass rank. In the first game, as you use certain types of weapons, your rank with them would increase. Let's say the more you use assault rifles, the more damage you deal, the faster you'd reload, and the better accuracy you'd have. With badass rank, you gain badass tokens for doing certain challenges that you can spend on various stat buffs that carry over through playthroughs. I get that this adds replay value to the game, but you lose a bit of the feeling that makes each playthrough unique. In Borderlands 1, maybe early on you got a loot drop for a super good sniper. You never really use snipers, but you decide that you'll try it out since the stats are really good. When the gun eventually becomes outclassed by other weapons, you see that your rank with snipers is really high and say, well, I guess this is a sniper playthrough now. With badass rank replacing weapon proficiency, you lose a lot of those cool moments that you'd have nudging you to commit to other playstyles that you normally wouldn't touch. Also, why is it called badass rank? I don't want the game telling me I'm badass. I want to feel it through the gameplay. Does the game do a good job of making me feel that way? Yes, but it's kind of like going up to me and telling me I have skin. It's true, but it's just kind of weird and creepy to have someone say it to me. Now, for the $1 million question. Was this the game that made Borderlands become kinda cringe? There, I said the thing. Yes and no. No, as this game does have a lot of jokes that even 12 years later still managed to get a laugh out of me.
Dear Roland, I can't help but notice the bloodshots. You are fighting packs of serious firepower. If you are going to have a chance against them, you will need to up your arsenal. You could always arm your men with some high-quality munitions from my store.
Shoot them
Buy
all!
from me.
Ah, damn it!
Dear bloodshots, I can't help but notice the Crimson Raiders. You are fighting packs some serious firepower. If you are going to have a chance against them, you will need to up your arsenal.
This will hurt.
Always arm your men with some
I want everything you got!
store.
Oh!
To bypass. Those Crimson Raiders will be dead in no time.
So fucking stupid.
But also yes, as there are a couple of jokes that don't really land, pop culture jokes that didn't really age too well since this was created during a time where we thought exhibit memes, Bad Luck Brian, and Rage comics were funny, as well as some seeds that were planted that eventually soulless corporate marketing dickheads would inevitably come to harvest. So the only way to show you how these seeds were unknowingly planted is to go through the story of Borderlands 2, to show you the cringe cracks in the series that would eventually shatter box office records for dogshit movie adaptations. The game starts with a similar intro sequence to the first game, recapping events of Borderlands 1, and that behind the vault wasn't just some monster that was locked away, but also the activation of an element known as iridium. It has mysterious properties and is also responsible for the new elemental type present in the game, slag, which makes enemies more susceptible to other types of damage when hit with it. The other applications? Well, you find out about those later in the story. However, the application that I'm going to talk about right now is the application of some pretty rough game design. Remember how I talked about the game being designed around not restricting your playstyle? Yeah, forget all that. The optimal strat, and it's not even close, is to slag an enemy, switch to another gun, and repeat. Ultimate Vault Hunter difficulty is even balanced around the knowledge that this is the best way to play. Swapping between different elemental weapons based on which enemies you are fighting is cool because not every element will succeed in every situation, and you have to decide when each element is necessary at a certain time. Except for slag. Always use slag. Keep using slag.
Don't stop using slag. Spend less time gooning and more time using slag. Let me catch you gooning.
Anyway, I'm glad this is the first and only game for slag to make an appearance in. Slag rant aside, the intro sequence is fine. There's not a whole lot to pick apart, but that's kind of the point. You see what's probably the skag from the first game intro limping towards the sign of Handsome Jack and getting dragged by the chain of the bandit vehicle. But this game takes place 5 years after Borderlands 1. That just doesn't make any sense. The skag has been injured for 5 years? You know what? Whatever, man. Borderlands is back, baby. All the bandits get rolled by the train, and it cuts to the 4 Vault Hunters being set up and betrayed by Handsome Jack. The problem is, if Handsome Jack is killing all the people that pose a threat to him and is oppressing the people on Pandora, why hasn't word spread about any of this when we have the technology here to travel between galaxies? Vault Hunters, above everyone else in the universe, should know what's happening on this planet. Are they dumb? Do they not care? Why does Handsome Jack even want to kill them instead of hiring them? Clearly, it seems like they're already down to work for him. Does any of this matter? You know what? Probably not. Just shoot stuff, man. Anyway, the Vault Hunters fight the dudes, you see their abilities, the train blows up, you land on the glacier, and you're rescued by Claptrap. Right from the jump, you can watch the intro and you already know what the game's all about and whether or not it's for you. I appreciate when games have this kind of confidence. If you don't like violence, games not taking themselves seriously, hot magic ladies, explosions, and violence, grab your receipt and go back to GameStop, beta. Because we still did that 12 years ago. Man, is this what a quarter-life crisis feels like? I don't like it, dude. The Southern Shelf is the first area and shows off the directions that the devs wanted to go with for Borderlands 2. While the first game consisted of vast deserts and rundown buildings, this game aims to create way more diverse environments, factions, enemies, and gameplay experiences. The Southern Shelf is full of snow, ice, and glaciers, with bullymongs being the natural threat in the area with their 4 arms, mobility, and ability to throw rocks at you, as well as the inevitable bandits that reside in the area. You also meet Sir Hammerlock, who is, alright I guess. I get the reason for his inclusion. With Pandora being what it is with all the crazy creatures and plants, it sets up a lot of funny gags to have this Victorian wildlife researcher as a character. But that seems like that's all he is. Just a gag. You don't really learn anything about him besides that he lost limbs to a thresher and that he's gay. And this isn't to imply any wokeness has gone too far in gaming stuff, but just that he doesn't have solid character development beyond being set up for gags, and there's a lot more that they could have done with him. He's not a poorly written character, or even a hollow character, but definitely represents the start of a style of writing that would eventually be used as a crutch by the series, which is think of an idea that's funny in theory, do the bare minimum elaborating and fleshing it out, or sometimes even less, and say to the audience, haha, isn't this funny, guys? Once again, he's not a poorly written character, just the start of a style of writing that only goes downhill from here. During the Southern Shelf section of the game, you go on a quest to get back the Eye of Claptrap stolen by a bullymong and fight bandits until you beat Captain Flint to leave the area towards Sanctuary. Earlier rants aside, this game does put a larger focus on characters, their backstories, what they're good at, and their flaws. Throughout the game, you obtain various echo logs of the main cast and what brought them to Pandora. This section also does a good job of establishing Handsome Jack as the main villain. In various recordings, you see him execute Helena Pearson civilians and chase out the resistance with indifference to the bandits who would inevitably take their place, as it would be easier to offer bounties to get them to do what he wants, sacrificing stability in the area for control. This immediately shows you that it's not people or some overarching mission he cares about, or says he cares about, but power. He also taunts you throughout the game, but is charismatic and funny while doing it, with him giving gruesome details about the murders he's engaged in, bragging about how rich he is, or just being a douche in general, making him the kind of villain you love to hate. During the Southern Shelf, you spend a lot of time with Claptrap. They somehow managed to walk the tightrope of him being cringe and obnoxious while still being somewhat likable. What's funny is you see the attitudes towards and how each NPC treats Claptrap, and you completely get where they're coming from by just being around and listening to him. And that is great writing. It's cringe, but properly harnessed in a way where it's contained and used to enhance the story and characters as well as bring you into the world.
Ha, Clap is having a shindig. You know I'd go, but I ain't gonna.
Like my favorite line in this entire game. I use that in my personal life too. You know, I'd go, but I ain't gonna.
After escaping the Southern Shelf, you steal one of Scooter's vehicles and earn the trust of the Crimson Lance before entering Sanctuary, the main hub area of Borderlands 2. The game opens up so much at this point, with different areas to travel to, quests that NPCs have, and just, well, look at it. Look at how open that is. With the winding roads, the different environments out in the distance, and overhead, the Hyperion satellite that doesn't let you forget the main threat you're facing. The vehicles also feel way more responsive in this game.
No. Download the Marvel Rivals.
Why?
Bro.
We'll try it out.
Bro, what is bro doing?
Are they paying you? You getting that bag, kid?
I've watched like 10 minutes of streamers playing it. I don't even
Okay,
know.
uninstall it then.
Isn't that bad?
Drop the game.
You're introduced to Marcus, Zed, Scooter, Moxie, and Tanis, and the problem with Hammerlock continues here. It feels like most of the cast are just one-trick ponies for jokes. Marcus is greedy, Zed has a reason that his medical license was revoked, Scooter is bad with women and is the butt of Sweet Home Alabama jokes, and Tanis is a crazy researcher lady. This isn't to say that a lot of the setup and punchlines don't work, Because they do. The jokes in this game are funny a lot of the time, and when they don't hit, they never feel like they were trying too hard, so it's all good. It just feels like they turned up the wacky aspects of these characters from the first game to 100, but didn't do a lot of character development to go alongside it. Moxie and Ellie and the Borderlands 1 Vault Hunters who you meet later are fine in terms of the quality of their character writing, but man, it really didn't feel like the other side characters got a lot of love and were just played for gags instead. In the first game, Scooter was a wacky guy who applied his skills as a mechanic to survive on Pandora. He was crass, silly, and maybe not book smart, but was good at what he did, and the runners that got you through the game were evidence of that. Tannis was an arrogant researcher, but felt down to earth and human, being driven insane by the isolation of her work, and her coworkers getting killed all around her. She even asked you to be her friend when you completed a quest for her in the first game, since you were probably the person that had most extensively interacted with her at that point. It's such ripe material for character development, but they just don't use it. Now with Scooter, it's haha incest, and with Tannis, it's haha crazy lady says crazy things. With Scooter, it even undermines his character since he's portrayed as this dumb as bricks guy, but somehow made the entire catch-a-ride system. When the jokes are good, like they generally are in this game, the writing is fine, honestly. However, when you remove the funny, that's where it can get really goddamn bad. Fundamentally, a joke is funny because it has an underlying truth to it. Whether it be a truth that nobody wants to admit, or poking fun at the absurdity of aspects of everyday life, comedy relies on some element of relatability. When you remove the comedic writing making something relatable, this type of writing can potentially feel very, very corporate and cringe. Because now there's a disconnect between somebody telling you something should be funny, cool, interesting, or whatever, versus it actually being that thing. When that somebody is a corporation that wants to sell you a hollow product that they think you want, you get corporate cringe. On some level, it's even offensive because you know that they don't relate to your situation, but they do want your money. Writers come and go, but what's always there is what the executives think sells. Haha funny robot, and haha crazy planet full of crazy people, and miss the forest from the trees. If there's bad writing in a serious story, it's seen as uninspired. But if there's bad writing in a comedy story, it's seen as offensive. This game works because the humor is relatable and well written, but in later games and adaptations, well, they begin to have some problems. The next section of the game involves you finding out Roland is missing and possibly being kidnapped by the Firehawk, who turns out to be Lilith after you meet her. You see siren powers are enhanced by Iridium and are shown one aspect of the element's power. You go to the dust where you meet Ellie and get a bandit vehicle to sneak into the Bloodshot stronghold where Roland is kept, and have your first skirmish with Hyperion as they fight bandits when Handsome Jack decides to not pay the ransom for the turret-toting trooper. You find out from Roland that the vault contains an ancient Iridian warrior that Handsome Jack wants to take control of. The game doesn't waste any time with unnecessary fluff in the story. Every section sets up characters, plot points, stakes, and objectives. Everything you interact with is meant to show you some part of the world and move on with the story. If you like a certain area and want to spend more time there, you're given multiple side quests to complete if you don't want to say goodbye to that section just yet. If you want to learn more about the clan wars in the dust, you can do that. If you want to get to know a certain character more, there's also content for you.
God damn, Ellie. You fine. I'd let her catch a ride.
If you want to grind the same boss over and over again for that legendary weapon, go ham, king. God, I actually wrote that. The game is excellent, giving you some slack to explore the world and pulling you in again to the main story when you're over-leveled or have exhausted the content in a certain area. They put options in the game to cast a wide net over people with differing playstyles, whether you play for the lore, the characters and banter, or just a grind, man. The next section has you moving to Tundra Express, where you light Varkids on fire to wake up Mordecai, meet Tiny Tina, blow up the train that has a vault key on it, and fight Wilhelm to find out that was just a power cell on board. You're told it'll power Sanctuary for a long time, but turns out Angel is actually working for Handsome Jack, and you just took down the city's shields. In a long shot strategy, Lilith has you grab her some Iridium and sends the city airborne with the help of Scooter while you're left stranded, ending the first act.
Yeah, I'm like a... It is like rough using TDR guns sometimes because like I'm just like I'm a giga reloader. I love reloading. If there's one thing I love more than breathing, okay, it's reloading, dude. And the fact that TDR guns, you just waste the entire clip if you fucking reload. Rough sometimes. It's rough out there. I'd probably put myself up there with like, you know, the Palestinians or some shit, like for oppression. Like real talk, man.
As much as I talked about my problems with the character development in this game, there are a lot of characters that do get love. Whenever you come across the living areas of certain NPCs, you'll see their food supplies, equipment, and personal effects, giving you a glimpse into how they live their day-to-day life. It's subtle and easy to miss, but it adds significant depth to each character you meet. After not playing the game for a while, I thought I'd hate Tiny Tina as a character more because of the whole random XD thing, but honestly, I don't think she's actually that bad. She's someone who grew up on a planet as unforgiving as Pandora, went through the trauma of losing her parents at a young age, and the only way she knows how to express herself in a way that's beneficial to her survival is through crafting explosives and murder. It's actually kind of sad when you think about it. She generally doesn't overstay her welcome, at least in the main game, but later in the series... After getting back in contact with Sanctuary, Angel tells you she's tired of manipulating people for Handsome Jack, and instructs you to get the lunar supply beacon to put Sanctuary back on the fast travel network after Lilith's liftoff knocked it out. This starts a holdout sequence where you see Jack lose his cool for the first time as he realizes he's beginning to lose power over Angel. When you arrive back at Sanctuary, Angel tells you she's charging the vault key, and hidden behind a disintegration barrier, a high-tech bunker, and a door that will only open for Handsome Jack. Roland sends you to the Wildlife Exploitation Preserve to chat with Mordecai about a lead to get past the barrier. You're told that Bloodwing had the claptrap upgrade to get past the barrier, but has been kidnapped by Handsome Jack. As you fight through the preserve, you see the lengths that Jack is willing to go to utilize the power of Iridium, and end the section on a boss fight against Bloodwing, who ultimately gets killed. I don't understand why Hyperion just didn't take the tag off of Bloodwing. Why would you not take everything off of a captured enemy in case there's something that you don't know the significance of? That kind of seems like Lord 101 there, my guy. You go on to recruit Brick, steal a voice modulator from a Jack body double, and fight your way up to the bunker that turns out to be a giant robot ship. So why did we even need to take down the barrier in the first place? All of your allies in this section are even air support, and you don't have any ground troops beyond the player. If only there was some way for you to, oh, I don't know, go over it. You soon discover Angel is a siren, and Jack is using his own daughter to pump full of Iridium to charge the vault key. Angel asks you to destroy the Iridium injectors and kill her to stop the vault key from charging, while Roland and Lilith help you out. After you destroy the injectors, Angel dies, and Jack shows up to kill Roland and kidnap Lilith. When you get back, you can continue the story or stick around to help the city mourn by telling everyone the bad news. You feel the melancholic mood of Sanctuary as the Resistance learns of its leader's death. While this is a small touch, it's indicative of the theory behind Borderlands 2's game design. If you only care about gameplay and shooting things, you can just move right on to other stuff. If you want a bit more story and to mourn Roland's death with everyone else, you can do that too. It's not a fun quest gameplay-wise, but it's quick and easy, and acts as a send-off for a character you played as or alongside in the first game to make the world feel more alive. It always adds a significant level of world building to watch the world as it reacts to the events that happen around it. His death is handled with a level of respect for the players since this was a character they knew and loved. This is a great way of writing story around the gameplay, rather than creating gameplay around the story. Not everyone will engage with it, and that's okay, but the people who want to will find the story and world enhanced by it. The people that don't can skip it and go back to shooting things and not do quests where you only talk to NPCs, because from a strictly gameplay-centric perspective, this quest does take away from the core gameplay experience. One of the big improvements you'll notice during this section is the variety on display. In the first Borderlands, the environments consisted mostly of deserts, with the odd exception here and there. While the enemies that inhabited these environments had a variety of tactics that they'd use against you, it always felt a bit chaotic with everyone just doing their own thing and not really working together. While this makes sense for factions like bandits and creatures without pack mentalities, it didn't make sense for a well-trained faction like the Crimson Lance and pack-oriented creatures like Skags. In Borderlands 2, the classic deserts, frozen wastelands, Hyperion cities Handsome Jack rules with an iron fist, and grassy mountainous valleys bring so much variety to the environments. Each area has its own factions, enemies, bosses, and unique side quests on display. You'll find that more enemies now work alongside each other. Hyperion robots will now have surveyors to repair them and give them shields. Ion loaders will create a barrier you can't shoot through. Wormhole threshers will drag you close to make you a sitting duck for their buddies to dig into. And now even badass Skags will spread their elemental abilities to other Skags. Some enemies even work against their allies in the case of Goliaths for the bandit faction when you knock off their helmets, highlighting their chaotic and unorganized nature. Now, not only do enemies have different behaviors than they did in Borderlands 1, They also have a variety of encounters you can experience based on the composition of the types of enemies involved and their proximity to one another. Act 3 starts with you heading to the Iridium Blight to get information from the Hyperion info stockade on the vault. First, you get sidetracked to get some explosives to cross the bridge, find yourself back in Firestone, and find out the vault is located somewhere called Heroes Pass. You'll also come across elite Hyperion troops that wield sniper rifles or can jacktivate their cloaks to become invisible. It's a funny line, but to have a soldier say that unironically shows that you only have the most dedicated to the cause that exist as his most powerful chess pieces. Too bad he didn't use them in the intro of the game and just sent regular robots at the Vault Hunters, but, you know, whatever. It's also a nice touch for the soldiers to call out your abilities to their allies. I had these guys call out that they were phase locked after I used my action skill on them, which showed that not only does Hyperion have information on you and your abilities, you're a threat that they take seriously enough to brief their soldiers on. It might not seem like a big deal, but that one small line is enough to make Hyperion appear much more capable and threatening than they otherwise would be. They know about you, the player, and they're taking that into account. During this time, there are additional side quests to learn more about how Handsome Jack came into power, his troubled upbringing, and this quest that I like my YouTube money too much to say out loud. Oh, you boys gotta do it. 12 Iridium? Like, that's just too good. Like, I mean, you gotta Roblox yourself for 12 Iridium. That's just how it's gotta be. You can learn that Angel's powers killed her mother, and Jack sealed her away while he used her for his gain while claiming that was for her own good. It's a nice bit of backstory because, yeah, people don't consciously do evil things because they like evil. They delude themselves into thinking that whatever lines they cross and whoever they hurt is worth it for the greater good. When Jack gets mad about anything relating to his daughter, yes, there's that fatherly concern for his child mixed in there, but it's warped by his desire for power. Whenever he loses any kind of power over her, he gets furious. He locked her away to have power over her freedom and to have her siren powers at his disposal. If he didn't want her powers to hurt anyone, which is laughable coming from a character like Jack, why do it in a way where you're isolating your kids from friends, life experiences, and the outside world? It just so happens that what he sees as the most loving thing he could do for her is also what allows him to amass the most wealth and power. This isn't mustache twirling evil, but the way that people end up treading dark paths in the real world. Power and money have the ability to corrupt people. While Jack seemingly does love his daughter in his own twisted way, he's certainly not a good father, and definitely somebody that you need to remove from power. The finale has you fighting your way to the vault through elite Hyperion troops and robots before you confront Jack in a chaotic fight where he sends out clones and drones to distract you. Turns out it worked, and you're too late once again to stop the vault from opening. The fight with the warrior is pretty awesome and is exactly what a final boss should be. You have to use every skill that the game has taught you up to this point. Shooting when you get the opening, taking cover against big attacks, and fire that really should have better indicators of where the hitbox actually is, repositioning when the lava rises, managing resources, and keeping enough enemies alive to revive yourself, but not too many that you begin to take too much damage. After you defeat the warrior, you kill Jack and learn that there are tons of vaults throughout the galaxy, and your work, well, it will never be done. What's ironically ironic about Borderlands 2 is how it occupies the other end of the spectrum it sets out to criticize. Money can buy power, money can buy influence, and money can amplify our worst impulses. Borderlands fundamentally sets out to criticize hollow corporate greed, how money is placed above all else, and the disasters left behind when we do so without purpose beyond that behind our actions. In Borderlands 2, Handsome Jack sees himself as someone with a clear purpose and goal, but every action he takes betrays that. While he says the things he does are for the greater good, those things also just so happen to be what net him the most money and influence. However, all money is just a means to an end. Power in paper form. Whether you're born into money, work your entire life towards it, or are at the right place at the right time, money buys freedom. The freedom to do and say as you want, the freedom to pursue your passions, the freedom to explore the world, and the freedom to do good for others. I'm not saying you can't do any of those things without money, but it definitely helps and makes those things a lot easier. After the success of Borderlands 1 and the approval of 2 with its increased budget, I can't imagine how ecstatic everyone on the team was. Here you are with this type of game that nobody has really made before, and it turns out to be a massive hit. Now many of the restrictions put on you before are suddenly lifted with the increased resources you have access to. You can see the passion shining through every wacky gun you shot, every environment you traveled, every eccentric NPC you spoke with, and every music track you listened to. Gearbox didn't just see the success of the first game as a victory, they saw it as a challenge. How can we go bigger and better than we did before and improve on the formula? They didn't just want to cash in, they wanted to make a sequel. Money wasn't the goal for the developers. Well, most of them. In my opinion, asterisk, allegedly, asterisk, it was the fuel. This game was created with the mindset of, does it sound cool? Yeah, sure, let's put it in the game. And fundamentally, that's the appeal of Borderlands, and why Gearbox was able to expand so much on the first game. What are all the things we wanted to do before, but now can without the budget restraints that came with taking a gamble on a genre of game that hadn't been proven successful in the market yet. Passion was what was behind everything that made Borderlands, well, Borderlands. While from the inside out, it was known what made Borderlands successful. The outside in, that was a different story entirely.